When I was 25, my friend Ryan and I decided to take a weekend trip deep into the woods. We chose an isolated spot known for its tranquility and lack of crowds. As we set up camp, everything seemed perfect: crisp air, towering trees, and the soothing sounds of nature. But as night fell, the atmosphere shifted. We were sitting by the fire, sharing stories and laughing, when we heard a faint rustling coming from the darkness beyond our small circle of light. At first, we shrugged it off as the wind or some nocturnal animal, but then came a low hum, almost melodic, drifting through the trees. It wasn't natural. My skin prickled as Ryan grabbed a flashlight, but by the time he shone it toward the sound, nothing was there. The humming stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. We tried to brush it off and went back to our conversation, though quieter now, more cautious. That's when something hit the side of Ryan's tent, a rock, maybe, or a branch, hard, enough to make us both jump. "Who's out there?" Ryan shouted, his voice trembling slightly. No response, just the echo of his words fading into the void. We debated packing up and leaving, but neither of us wanted to admit defeat. Instead, we agreed to take turns keeping watch. I volunteered to go first while Ryan crawled into his sleeping bag. The forest felt alive around me, every shadow shifting, just out of sync with reality. Then, about an hour in, I saw movement near the edge of the tree line. A figure stood there, still as a statue, watching us. I scrambled for the flashlight, but when I pointed it at the spot, the figure vanished. I woke Ryan immediately, and together we scanned the area. Nothing. Frustrated and scared, we retreated to his tent, clutching bear spray like it was our only lifeline. Sleep didn't come easily. Every snap of a twig, every whisper of leaves, had us on edge. Hours later, I woke abruptly to find the zipper of the tent slowly being pulled down, not from the outside, but inside. Before I could react, a hand reached in, pale and cold, grasping at empty air. Ryan screamed, and we both bolted out of the tent, grabbing what we could before fleeing into the night. As we ran, the forest seemed to close in around us, branches clawing at our faces, roots tripping us at every step. Behind us, footsteps followed, not heavy ones, but deliberate, steady. They never got closer, but they never stopped either. By the time we reached the car, soaked in sweat and adrenaline coursing through our veins, the sun was beginning to rise. We didn't speak. Neither of us needed to. Whatever had been out there, it hadn't wanted us to stay. And even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling that it's still waiting, lurking in those woods, humming softly in the dark. A few months after that harrowing experience, I found myself drawn to another adventure, albeit one far less voluntary. My late teenage years brought unexpected wealth following my father's passing, including an inheritance that covered a cabin up in Oregon by Mount Bachelor. The cabin was set to be sold within a month, but until then, it sat vacant. Seeing this as a chance to clear my head, I packed up my snowboarding gear, grabbed my dog Midnight, and headed up in my dad's car to the cabin. The first 2 days were blissfully normal. I spent my days playing with Midnight in the snow, snowboarding, and the evenings relaxing with PlayStation games, music, drinks, and cigarettes on the balcony. I had stocked up on food, smokes, and liquor, so aside from occasional outings to hit the slopes, I was content. The cabin itself was cozy, with a living room, kitchen, and a guest bedroom downstairs and upstairs. 2 more rooms, along with a walkout balcony attached to the master bedroom. I never ventured into the other rooms, always keeping their doors shut. On the 3rd day, amidst heavy snowfall, things took a strange turn. While outside with midnight, I noticed fresh footprints in the snow around our cabin. They led away towards the denser part of the trees and disappeared. Dismissing them, I went back inside. That night, as I lay in bed with midnight, he suddenly perked up, jumped off the bed, and ran downstairs. I heard him moving around restlessly. When I went to check, he was eager to go outside, but once there, he didn't relieve himself. Instead, he kept pulling his leash towards the dense trees, sniffing the side of the house and looking up at the roof. Back inside, we settled down again. But half an hour later, I heard what sounded like hooves walking on the roof 6 distinct steps. Rationalizing it as a falling pinnacone or an animal, I still couldn't ignore the man-length stride of the steps. Midnight heard it too, quickly running to the balcony screen door, expecting to be let out. Determined to face whatever it was, I grabbed my coat, shoes, cigarettes, and flashlight, stepping out onto the balcony. As I lit my cigarette and scanned the roof with the flashlight, nothing seemed amiss. The snow was undisturbed. Yet, staring into the darkness, I noticed something, a figure crouched between branches of a nearby tree. It looked tall, 8 or 9 feet, and incredibly thin, squatting on one branch with freakishly long white arms extended above its head, holding onto the branch above. Its mouth was wide open, expressionless. Midnight stood behind me, pacing and lightly barking, debating whether to shine the light directly at it. Something in my head screamed not to. Slowly, I backed into the room, pulling Midnight with me. Once inside, I locked the door and shone the light outside, but the figure was gone, shutting the curtains. I retreated to bed, trying to calm my racing heart. But soon, light tapping at the screen door began a consistent, rhythmic sound that didn't stop for nearly an hour. Midnight stared at the door but wouldn't approach it. The weirdest part was the feeling someone was inviting me to open that door. Simultaneously, I kept hearing my dad's voice in my head, telling me to stay in bed and not do it. Listening to my dad's voice, I stayed put, eventually passing out. In the morning, I packed everything swiftly and left, the haunting image of that figure etched into my mind. Years passed, but the memory of that night never faded. However, life moved on, and so did I one day. Searching Craigslist for a new phone and iPhone 7 equivalent, I stumbled upon a listing for a sealed, factory-unlocked device at a fantastic price. The seller, Melvin, seemed genuine over text, sending me a video of the unopened box. He suggested meeting at a police precinct parking lot for safety, which initially reassured me, but when my friend Martina and I arrived, the situation turned sketchy. The precinct parking lot was deserted, and Melvin claimed his car had broken down on a secluded road nearby. Reluctantly, we drove to his location, finding only a black car, with no visible occupants. Sensing danger, we sped away, stopping at a diner for coffee. There, a hooded man entered, glancing repeatedly at us. Realizing he was Melvin, we left hurriedly, only to discover later that our car tire had been slashed. Driving home on a spare tire, Martina and I laughed nervously, thankful we avoided a potentially dangerous trap. But the incident served as a stark reminder. Sometimes, the scariest encounters aren't with ghosts or supernatural entities, but with people who mean harm. Months later, I met Phoebe on a dating app. After a couple of dates, she invited me to a high school reunion party hosted at a rich classmate's house. The event felt off from the start. Everyone stared at me intensely, asking invasive questions. The guests appeared older than Phoebe's stated age of 28, some looking well into their 30s. Phoebe herself seemed evasive, unable to recall details about the host or many attendees. Growing increasingly uncomfortable, I excused myself to explore the house. Returning to the main room, a younger-looking man whispered urgently, "You should leave. That girl isn't who she says she is." His warning confirmed my suspicions. Without hesitation, I slipped out unnoticed, driving straight home. Researching Phoebe later, I discovered discrepancies in her story. Her real name was Claire Forster, and the address she gave matched none of the records. Blocking her number, I shared the bizarre tale with friends, each offering theories about what might have transpired. Regardless, I knew I'd narrowly escaped a potentially perilous situation. Reflecting on these experiences, I realized how often danger lurks in the mundane. Whether in the solitude of nature, the quiet of a remote cabin, the anonymity of online transactions, or the seemingly harmless context of social gatherings, threats can emerge unexpectedly. Each encounter taught me valuable lessons about trust, intuition, and the importance of listening to that inner voice urging caution. Life, indeed, is unpredictable, and sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones we live to tell.